Humanity stands at a pivotal moment, entering a new world that stretches far beyond the limits of our evolutionary design, limits we've rarely acknowledged, let alone respected. Our ancestors evolved within the boundaries of the natural world, relying on its rhythms, resources, and balance for survival. But over the past 10,000 years, we began layering a second world on top of it. The built environment, cities, roads, machines, and the systems of industry and infrastructure that now dominate much of the planet. Now, those same forces are propelling us into a third world, the digital and quantum domain. This realm is fast-moving, invisible, and increasingly influential, beginning to shape how we think, learn, work, and relate to one another. These three worlds, the natural, the built, and the digital, each operate by different rules. Each offers opportunity, and each brings real risk. The problem is not that we've created new worlds. The problem is that we've never learned how to live responsibly within any of them. We've overexploited the natural world, overextended the built world, and now risk losing ourselves in a digital one that evolves faster than we do. This isn't just an environmental or technological failure, it's a deeper crisis of integration. It reveals serious flaws in how we think about, design, and live within complex systems. The problem runs through our psychology, our economic models, and the very structure of our institutions. We keep making the same mistakes because we're operating with outdated assumptions, misaligned incentives, and systems that aren't built for long-term sustainability. If we want a different future, we must begin by facing the truth about why our current path is failing. We need to examine the deeper roots of our disconnect, why our choices, time and again, lead to fragmentation, short-term thinking, and unintended harm. Our future depends on something we've never truly mastered, the ability to integrate across these worlds with intelligence and care. This demands a fundamental shift in how we design, govern, and engage with the systems that shape our lives. The urgency is real. The systems we've created are evolving faster than our ability to adapt to them. If we don't act now with clarity, courage, and foresight, we risk losing not just balance, but meaning itself. The natural world, our first integration failure. Our relationship with the natural world is perhaps the most urgent and revealing example of our failure to integrate wisely. Despite overwhelming scientific consensus on climate change, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem collapse, we continue to act as though we are separate from, rather than dependent on, the natural systems that sustain life. This isn't just a modern misstep, it reflects a recurring pattern throughout human history. Again and again, civilizations have collapsed not simply because of environmental stress, but because of their refusal or inability to adapt to it. The Maya civilization offers a powerful and cautionary example. Between 800 and 900 CE, archaeological records show that the region faced severe droughts, with rainfall dropping by as much as 40 to 50% during peak periods. Instead of shifting course, the Maya doubled down on expansion, intensifying agriculture, constructing ever larger urban centers, and reinforcing systems that demanded more from the land even as nature provided less. When the droughts worsened, their complex centralized systems couldn't adjust. The result was the widespread abandonment of cities and the unraveling of a once thriving society. This pattern of civilizations exceeding ecological limits until their systems collapse is not an isolated historical accident. It is a recurring cycle, echoed across cultures, continents, and centuries. Again and again, societies have ignored environmental warnings, maintained unsustainable systems, and paid the ultimate price. The Akkadian Empire, once a powerful force in Mesopotamia, fell around 2200 BCE after prolonged drought and aridification crippled its agricultural base. The Indus Valley civilization declined as monsoon patterns shifted and rivers changed course, disrupting the hydrological systems their cities depended on. In both cases, environmental change collided with rigid societal structures unable or unwilling to adapt. Perhaps the most instructive example comes from the Western Roman Empire. During the 6th and 7th centuries CE, a series of massive volcanic eruptions triggered what scientists call the Late Antique Little Ice Age, dropping global temperatures by roughly 2 degrees Celsius. Roman agriculture, which had thrived during the earlier Roman climate optimum, collapsed as harvests failed across the empire's breadbasket regions. This agricultural breakdown led to widespread famine, malnutrition, and a weakened population, conditions that paved the way for the plague of Justinian, which may have killed half the population. These cascading crises struck precisely as the empire faced growing external threats from Germanic tribes in the west to Persian armies in the east. Rome's failure was not simply environmental or military, it was systemic. Rather than adapt their agricultural systems or restructure their economic base to suit a new climate reality, Roman leaders clung to old assumptions, hoping for a return to the past. That return never came. In each of these cases, the root failure was the same. Civilizations treated the natural world as an infinite reservoir to be extracted from, rather than a living system to be respected and integrated with. They built societies on the illusion of permanence, of predictable rainfall, stable seasons, and unchanging abundance. And when nature shifted, they could not. Today's climate crisis represents the same pattern playing out on a global scale. Despite decades of scientific warnings, global carbon emissions continue rising, biodiversity loss accelerates, and we approach multiple planetary boundaries simultaneously. We have created economic and political systems that are structurally incapable of operating within ecological limits, treating the natural world as an externality rather than the foundation upon which all human activity depends. The built world, architecture of alienation. Our second major failure of integration lies in the very environments we've built, our cities, buildings, and infrastructure, which now shelter more than half of the world's population. While these constructed spaces have driven remarkable economic growth and technological progress, they have also given rise to what researchers increasingly refer to as anxious cities, urban environments that, by their very design and function, contribute to chronic psychological stress. The toll on mental health is not abstract, it is visible, measurable, and growing. People living in cities experience significantly higher rates of schizophrenia, anxiety disorders, PTSD, and paranoia compared to those in rural areas. This isn't coincidence, it's a consequence. We have designed our cities for efficiency, density, and economic productivity, but not for human flourishing. The result is a built world that wears down our mental health even as it powers our economies. If we are truly committed to creating a healthier, more sustainable future, we must face a hard truth. The environments we build are, in turn, shaping us, often in ways that undermine our well-being. But the harm extends far beyond individual mental health. It strikes at the core of what makes us human. Our built environments have systematically undermined the psychosocial foundations essential for personal and collective well-being. Through decades of planning driven by efficiency, profit, and expansion, we have created cities that disrupt the very processes we rely on to thrive. Modern urban design has reduced people's sense of control over their surroundings, weakened the social bonds that sustain us, and made it harder to recover from daily stress and fatigue. It has compromised our ability to manage social interaction in healthy ways, leaving most overstimulated, isolated, or both. These are not incidental side effects, they are direct outcomes of how we've chosen to shape our physical world. We've fragmented land use, stripped away public gathering spaces, and prioritized cars and commercial zones over human connection. In doing so, we've engineered what researchers now call urban alienation, a pattern of disconnection, powerlessness, and social isolation that is built into the very layout of our cities. This isn't just poor design, it's a failure to understand that how we live with one another depends on how we live among one another. And until we treat the design of cities not just as an architectural challenge, but as a moral one, a matter of health, equity, and belonging, we will continue to build places that erode the human spirit instead of supporting it. The failure of integration here is unmistakable. We have built our cities and buildings with little regard for the psychological realities of the people who inhabit them. Urban planning has been treated as a technical or economic exercise focused on density, traffic flow, and zoning codes, while ignoring the profound impact these choices have on human minds and lives. But every zoning decision, every overlooked green space, every park bench or sterile stretch of pavement shapes how people feel, connect, and function. These are not neutral choices, they carry psychological weight. And too often, the environments we've created actively work against our well-being. If we are to move forward, we must stop designing places for people and start designing places around people, around how we think, feel, relate, and heal. That means recognizing the built environment not just as infrastructure, but as a foundation for human thriving. True development doesn't just build cities, it builds lives worth living within them. Repeating our mistakes in virtual space. Now we are entering a third world, the digital and quantum realms that increasingly shape how we relate, work, learn, and even perceive reality. But instead of learning from our past failures, we are repeating them, building yet another environment without regard for long-term human well-being. This time the terrain is virtual, but the consequences are just as real. The psychological toll of digital integration is already becoming clear, and it mirrors the harms seen in poorly designed physical spaces. A growing body of research shows strong correlations between heavy social media use and rising rates of depression, anxiety, loneliness, self-harm, and suicidal ideation. These are not isolated outcomes, they are symptoms of a deeper design failure. Much like urban alienation, digital alienation emerges when systems prioritize speed, scale, and engagement over depth, authenticity, and connection. Online platforms often amplify social comparison, encourage performative behavior, and foster networks of shallow interaction that leave people more isolated than ever. Instead of strengthening human bonds, these digital tools frequently erode them, replacing face-to-face connection with fleeting digital substitutes that fail to nourish the human psyche. We are building the digital world as we built cities, for economic growth, not for grounding. And if we don't change course, we risk constructing a virtual environment that magnifies the very crises of loneliness, disconnection, and disorientation that we are already struggling to escape. And now, artificial intelligence integration presents not only technological challenges, but profound threats to human autonomy and identity. As AI systems become more powerful, more predictive, and more embedded in the fabric of everyday life, the stakes grow higher, not just for democratic institutions and economies, but for individuals trying to retain a sense of agency, purpose, and selfhood in an increasingly automated world. Governments are already struggling to keep up with the pace of AI advancement. Regulation lags behind innovation, ethical frameworks remain underdeveloped, and public discourse is often reactive rather than proactive. Yet even more troubling is what's happening beneath the surface, where AI systems are quietly reshaping how we make decisions, what information we see, and even how we understand ourselves. From hiring algorithms to personalized education platforms, from medical diagnostics to algorithmically curated newsfeeds, we are integrating AI into decision-making processes that once required human judgment, empathy, and accountability. While these tools promise efficiency and objectivity, they also carry hidden costs: the erosion of personal responsibility, the narrowing of human choice, and the slow outsourcing of cognitive and moral labor to machines. This raises urgent questions. What does it mean to exercise free will when algorithms anticipate our preferences before we form them? How do we maintain a coherent sense of self when identity is shaped by feedback loops in social media, predictive advertising, and AI-powered surveillance systems? As these systems grow more opaque and more autonomous, the average person is left with less understanding and less control, while society becomes more watched, more influenced, and more fragmented. The loss is not just of privacy or data, it's a loss of personal agency, of the ability to define one's own narrative in a world increasingly written by invisible code. And yet, we are moving forward at full speed, deploying these technologies in schools, hospitals, workplaces, and homes, without fully grappling with their long-term psychological and societal consequences. Perhaps the most alarming aspect of our digital transformation is how little we understand about its impact on the human mind and how far its influence may already reach. We are in the midst of a vast, unregulated experiment on human psychology and development, and early evidence suggests the consequences are both profound and deeply troubling. Social media use, especially among young people, appears to cause distinct changes in brain development, altering emotional learning, attention, and social behavior. But the effects go even deeper. Recent research has revealed that even mild internet use can cause measurable epigenetic changes, altering how our DNA is expressed without changing the genetic code itself. In saliva samples taken from university students, scientists observed shifts in key neurotransmission genes: the oxytocin receptor, OXTR, which affects trust and bonding, the dopamine transporter DAT1, which governs reward and motivation, and the serotonin transporter SERT, which plays a central role in mood regulation. In short, digital exposure is rewriting the molecular instructions that shape how we connect, feel, and respond to the world. At the same time, artificial intelligence is crossing into even more direct biological terrain. Tools like OpenCRISPR-1, the first AI-designed gene editor, are now capable of rewriting the human genome with astonishing precision. Large language models trained on millions of CRISPR proteins are generating entirely novel gene editing tools, some hundreds of mutations removed from any known natural protein. Yet these synthetic systems often outperform the original designs created by nature. Together, these developments represent an unprecedented convergence. Digital technology is not only reshaping human behavior and mental health, but also altering the biological foundation of who we are. We are experiencing involuntary changes to our genetic expression due to everyday digital exposure, even as we begin to voluntarily deploy AI tools that can rewrite our genome at will. This dual transformation, the merging of epigenetic disruption and AI-driven genetic engineering, marks a true turning point in human history. And yet, we are charging ahead with astonishing speed, armed with world-altering technologies, but guided by little foresight, minimal regulation, and almost no serious reckoning with the long-term consequences. Public debate remains fixated on automation and job displacement, while a far deeper challenge looms beneath the surface. We are facing a civilizational crossroads. For the first time in history, we hold tools capable of altering the very blueprint of human life, and we are already employing them. From AI-engineered gene editors to digital systems reshaping our cognitive and emotional development, we are beginning to transform what it means to be human without a clear sense of direction, limits, or purpose. This is no longer a question of whether we can do these things, but whether we should, and what kind of future we are unconsciously coding into existence. The real danger is not in the tools themselves, but in our failure to ask, what are we becoming? What values guide us? And how do we ensure that our power to change life does not outpace our responsibility to protect it? The digital divide adds another layer of integration failure. Over half the global population lacks access to high-speed broadband, creating compounding negative effects on economic and political equality. We are building digital worlds that systematically exclude large portions of humanity while creating psychological harm for those who do have access. Why we keep failing. The pattern of integration failure across our natural, built, and digital worlds is not coincidental, but stems from how human psychology, economic systems, and decision-making processes approach complex, long-term challenges. Cognitive biases and psychological barriers. Some of the reasons we struggle with sustainability are clear, but others run deeper, driven by subtle, often invisible forces rooted in our own psychology. At the heart of the issue is a fundamental mismatch between the world we've built and the minds we inherited. Human cognition evolved to deal with immediate, local threats, problems we could see, hear, and act on in real time, not the complex, long-term, and abstract challenges that define today's issues. Research points to at least 7 psychological traits that make sustainable integration particularly difficult. One of the most powerful is experiential vagueness. Sustainability problems, like climate change, digital dependency, or the mental health effects of urban living, develop slowly and incrementally. They don't trigger our senses in the same way a physical danger might. The damage accumulates quietly, often invisibly, over years or decades, making it hard for our brains to register the urgency. Another major barrier is our bias against long-term thinking. Sustainability often requires us to make sacrifices now for benefits that won't materialize for years or even generations. Yet our brains are hardwired for short-term survival. We respond more strongly to immediate costs than to delayed rewards, even when the long-term gains are far greater. This means we're prone to undervalue the future, making it difficult to prioritize the kinds of systemic changes that sustainability demands. This isn't simply a failure of willpower or awareness. It's a cognitive challenge hardwired into the human brain. We evolved to survive in a world of immediate threats and short-term rewards, not to navigate the slow-moving, complex, and uncertain problems that define sustainability today. If we fail to recognize this, we risk placing the blame on individuals for what is, in part, a structural mismatch between human psychology and modern reality. But recognizing these cognitive limitations isn't an excuse, it's an opportunity. Once we understand where the blind spots are, we can begin to design systems, policies, and narratives that work with human nature rather than against it. Tools from behavioral science, education, and technology can help us create environments that nudge us toward wiser, longer-term decisions, not through coercion, but through alignment with how people actually think, feel, and behave. To build a truly sustainable future, we don't just need smarter technologies or better data. We need strategies that are psychologically realistic. We must craft solutions that make the sustainable choice, the intuitive choice, the easy choice, the meaningful choice. This is especially important because the challenges we face in all three of our worlds, the natural, the built, and the digital, are defined by complexity and uncertainty. These are tough problems, requiring knowledge that cuts across disciplines and systems. Unfortunately, human cognition tends to favor simplicity and certainty. Faced with overwhelming complexity, we reach for quick fixes, linear thinking, and binary choices. The result? Oversimplified solutions that ignore root causes and fail to account for the interconnectedness of the systems we're trying to change. Another barrier is the psychological threat posed by change itself. Sustainability often demands that we alter deeply embedded lifestyles and infrastructure, how we move, eat, build, and consume. These shifts can feel like a threat to our comfort, identity, or status. Even when people understand the long-term benefits, they may resist out of fear of loss, fear of disruption, fear of falling behind. This resistance isn't irrational, it's human. But it also means that change must be framed not as sacrifice, but as transformation. We must show that a more sustainable world can also be a more livable, just, and fulfilling one. Because if we want people to help build the future, they need to see themselves in it, not just surviving, but thriving. Economic and systemic failures. Our economic systems don't just coexist with the psychological barriers to sustainability, they amplify them. By design, they reward short-term gains while ignoring long-term consequences, creating powerful structural incentives for unsustainable behavior. In both corporate boardrooms and government institutions, decision-making is often driven by the next quarter's earnings report or the next election cycle, rather than by long-term vision or intergenerational responsibility. Market pressures for immediate returns routinely override broader considerations of environmental integrity, public health, and social well-being. This short-term mindset isn't just distorting market priorities, it's creating a dangerous bias throughout the economy, favoring technologies that promise fast returns over those essential to long-term prosperity. Nowhere is this misalignment more glaring than in the current venture capital frenzy around artificial intelligence. In 2024 alone, AI startups attracted a staggering $131.5 billion in global funding, representing a 52% surge from the previous year. Meanwhile, climate technology investment collapsed by 40%, falling to just $19.7 billion, the third consecutive year of decline. By early 2025, AI accounted for 71% of all venture capital funding. This isn't just an imbalance, it's a profound economic pathology. We are pouring unprecedented capital into technologies that promise greater efficiency and profitability. Yet we're doing so with little regard for the deeper consequences these tools may have on human identity, psychological well-being, and social cohesion. The unchecked race to develop artificial intelligence reflects a dangerous blind spot in our economic logic, the inability to value long-term resilience or confront existential risk. AI companies offer what the current system craves: rapid scalability, fast market entry, and exponential returns that fit neatly into 3 to 7 year venture capital cycles. These technologies align perfectly with a financial culture obsessed with speed and short-term gain. Meanwhile, the solutions we actually need to ensure the survival and flourishing of humanity, resilient infrastructure, ecosystem restoration, climate-adaptive and human-centered urban design, sustainable agriculture, require slower, more complex, and less immediately lucrative investments. They demand patient capital, interdisciplinary collaboration, and a long-term mindset that our financial institutions are neither built for nor incentivized to support. We are witnessing a civilization that would rather automate its systems than safeguard its foundations. In our rush to optimize intelligence, we are neglecting the ecological and societal scaffolding that intelligence needs to function. This is the ultimate form of short-termism, building smarter tools to solve increasingly complex problems, while dismantling the conditions that allow any solution to matter in the long run. The irony is stark and sobering. We are building smarter machines while ignoring the crumbling foundations beneath our feet. In our obsession with intelligence, we are forgetting wisdom. In our pursuit of optimization, we are discarding the conditions that make any form of progress sustainable. Unless we fundamentally rethink how we allocate capital and define value, we risk creating a future where we are surrounded by powerful technologies, but lack the environmental, psychological, and societal stability to survive, let alone thrive. The path forward requires more than better technology. It demands a new investment paradigm, one that values resilience over rapid growth, stewardship over speed, and life-supporting systems over short-term wins. Until we realign capital with what truly sustains life, we will continue to race toward a future where we may have brilliant machines, but lack a stable world in which to use them. Flawed accounting creates a systemic bias toward exploitation. At its core, our economic system is built on a dangerously outdated accounting model, one that treats environmental destruction, psychological harm, and social breakdown not as real costs, but as externalities, invisible byproducts of profit-driven activity that are offloaded onto society rather than borne by those responsible. When a company pollutes a river, it's not the shareholders who suffer, it's the local community that faces health crises and pays for cleanup. When social media platforms contribute to rising rates of anxiety, depression, and loneliness, it's families, schools, and mental health systems left to pick up the pieces. These costs are nowhere to be found on financial statements. They're excluded from balance sheets, ignored in quarterly earnings calls, and absent from calculations of so-called economic growth. As a result, practices that are clearly harmful ecologically, socially, and psychologically can still appear economically rational. In reality, they are anything but. This systemic blind spot creates a powerful bias toward exploitation. Activities that extract value from nature, fracture social cohesion, or undermine mental health are often celebrated as indicators of success. Meanwhile, regenerative efforts, those that restore ecosystems, strengthen communities, and promote long-term well-being, are dismissed as too slow, too costly, or too uncertain. The logic of the system rewards extraction over renewal, fragmentation over integration, and short-term returns over long-term resilience. As long as this remains the case, those working to create a sustainable, equitable future will be swimming against the tide, penalized by the very system they're trying to reform, while those perpetuating harm are rewarded with capital, influence, and praise. Real progress will require more than better technology or smarter business strategies. It will require a fundamental rethinking of how we define value and measure success. We need economic models that internalize environmental and social costs, reward patient capital, and prioritize outcomes that support human and planetary well-being over time. Because sustainability, equity, and health are not peripheral concerns. They are the foundation of any economy that hopes to endure. And until our systems reflect that truth, we will continue mistaking short-term profit for long-term prosperity at a cost none of us can afford. The knowledge-action gap. Perhaps most frustrating and most dangerous is the persistent and widening gap between what we know and what we do. The scientific evidence on climate change, the psychological toll of urban living, and the dangers of digital addiction is no longer in question. These realities are widely acknowledged not only by researchers but also by policymakers, media outlets, and the public. And yet this awareness has translated into woefully inadequate shifts in behavior, policy, or investment. Despite the warnings, we continue down the same unsustainable path as if knowledge alone were enough to drive change. This gap between understanding and action is not simply a matter of inertia or indifference. It reveals a deeper crisis in how we make collective decisions. Our institutions, while designed to serve democratic and economic functions, are structurally misaligned with the demands of long-term sustainability. Democratic systems, for all their strengths, are built around short-term electoral cycles. Politicians are incentivized to deliver immediate results, not to invest in outcomes that may not materialize for decades. Long-term planning rarely wins elections. Similarly, market systems prioritize efficiency, competition, and short-term profit, making it extremely difficult to reward businesses that invest in sustainability, resilience, or ecological restoration. Meanwhile, regulatory bodies, often under-resourced and overburdened, are consistently outpaced by the speed of technological innovation. By the time rules are in place, the systems they aim to regulate have already evolved. The result is an institutional architecture fundamentally biased against the kind of integrated, future-oriented thinking that sustainability demands. Instead of systems designed to anticipate, adapt, and prevent, we have structures that react, delay, and defer, often until it is too late. This is not just a failure of leadership, it is a failure of design. We have built political and economic systems optimized for speed, scale, and short-term returns, but not for wisdom, stewardship, or collective foresight. And without a radical rethinking of these systems, we will remain trapped in a cycle of reactive crisis management, lurching from one emergency to the next while failing to address the root causes that drive them. To close the gap between knowledge and action, we need more than awareness campaigns or technological fixes. We need to redesign the decision-making frameworks themselves, which requires rewarding long-term thinking, prioritizing intergenerational well-being, and embedding sustainability into the core of how we govern, invest, and plan. Only then can we transform insight into impact and avoid the disasters we already know are coming. Learning from our failures. Understanding the root causes of our integration failures across our three worlds points toward strategies for building more sustainable relationships with the complex systems we inhabit and create. Design for human psychology. First, we must commit to designing systems that work with human psychology, not against it. For too long, we've expected people to overcome deep-seated cognitive biases through sheer willpower, ignoring the psychological architecture that shapes how we perceive, decide, and behave. If we want real change, we must meet people where they are, by creating environments that account for how the human mind actually works. In the natural world, that means making environmental impacts tangible and immediate rather than abstract and distant. Climate change feels remote because its consequences unfold slowly and often invisibly. To counter this, we need tools that bring the reality of environmental harm into people's daily awareness. Carbon pricing that reflects the true cost of emissions, real-time energy feedback systems, and hyperlocal environmental monitoring can all help translate scientific data into lived experience, bridging the gap between awareness and action. In the built world, we must elevate emotional sustainability to a core principle of urban design. Cities should support psychological well-being, not erode it. That means designing neighborhoods that foster connection rather than isolation, integrating access to green spaces, reducing noise and visual clutter, and creating environments that promote calm, belonging, and human dignity. When we shape our physical environments with mental health in mind, we create cities that not only function, but truly nourish. But achieving this vision also requires transforming the economics of the built environment. Our current development models often prioritize short-term returns and low upfront costs, leading to cookie-cutter construction, minimal attention to community integration, and materials that compromise both sustainability and livability. We need bold innovation in construction technology and building materials, ranging from low-carbon concrete and cross-laminated timber to modular and adaptive design solutions that reduce environmental impact while enhancing human experience. To enable this, building codes and zoning regulations must evolve, allowing for experimentation and scaling of next-generation methods that support both ecological and psychological resilience. True progress in urban design will only be possible when our economic frameworks and regulatory systems align with the values of long-term sustainability and human well-being. To support this transformation, we must also reorient our architecture and engineering education toward the psychological and social complexities of modern life. Too often, design curricula focus narrowly on structural efficiency, aesthetics, and cost optimization, without sufficient attention to how built environments shape mental health, social behavior, and community dynamics. Future architects and engineers must be trained to understand the emotional impact of space, the importance of sensory experience, and the subtle cues that influence how people connect or withdraw in their surroundings. At the same time, shifting household demographics from aging populations and single-person households to multi-generational living and remote work demand a rethinking of conventional housing models. We need to explore more flexible, adaptive, and communal living arrangements that reflect how people actually live today, not how they lived 50 years ago. Integrating these insights into professional training is essential for creating built environments that are not only structurally sound, but socially responsive and psychologically enriching. In the digital world, we must embed digital well-being into the very foundations of platform design. Today's technologies are too often engineered to hijack attention, exploit insecurities, and reward compulsive use. It doesn't have to be this way. We can build digital systems that prioritize meaningful interaction over endless scrolling, that strengthen focus instead of fragmenting it, and that empower users to make conscious, values-aligned choices rather than nudging them toward addictive behaviors. In response to rising parental concern, the digital community has begun making early efforts to design with well-being in mind rather than discounting it. Take Instagram's "You're All Caught Up" notification, which is a simple feature that honors our innate desire for closure instead of exploiting our fear of missing out through endless scrolling. Or consider Duolingo's streak freeze system, which accepts that people are fallible and inconsistent. Rather than punishing missed days with shame and loss, it preserves motivation by offering gentle continuity and realistic goals. Apple's screen time tools provide users with visibility and control over their digital habits, not by demanding iron willpower, but by making balance more achievable and self-regulation more intuitive. Each of these design choices reflects a potential shift, away from seeing human psychology as a vulnerability to exploit, and toward treating it as a natural system to support and uplift. The imperative is no longer just technical, it's moral. We know how to design in ways that support well-being, resilience, and meaningful engagement. To choose otherwise, to knowingly build systems that undermine attention, exploit vulnerability, and fuel dependency is not just poor design, it is an ethical failure. The future of digital technology will be defined by this choice. Whether we continue building systems that exploit the human mind, or finally begin building ones that strengthen it. This shift from exploiting the vulnerabilities in how humans think and feel for profit to designing digital systems that genuinely empower people is not just strategic, it's essential. Nowhere is this more urgent than in the development of artificial intelligence. If AI systems are designed without careful attention to human cognition, emotion, and ethical boundaries, they won't just frustrate or distract us. They will replace core aspects of human agency. Superintelligent AI. The question of whether humans can retain meaningful agency in the era of superintelligent AI exposes a profound paradox at the heart of our technological evolution. Emerging research reveals that even well-intentioned, so-called intent-aligned AI systems can undermine human autonomy, not through malicious design, but by subtly reshaping the very formation of human intentions. These systems, designed to predict and fulfill our preferences, can inadvertently influence how those preferences are formed, leading to what researchers describe as agency loss. This erosion of self-direction occurs even in seemingly benign interactions, and our biological and psychological defenses are ill-equipped to recognize or resist it. The stakes grow even higher with the development of artificial general intelligence, AGI. Leading AI safety experts now warn that the aspiration to build powerful, autonomous AI agents is fundamentally incompatible with the idea of full human control or perfect alignment. In other words, even under the best-case scenarios, we may never be able to fully dictate the behavior of systems more intelligent and potentially more influential than ourselves. But this sobering truth need not mark the end of human freedom. A more pragmatic and hopeful path is emerging, the concept of bounded alignment. Rather than striving for impossible total control, this approach focuses on designing AI systems whose behaviors remain within acceptable boundaries, much like how we relate to other people. These systems would not be perfectly obedient, but reliably cooperative. The key is ensuring they possess the ability to understand human values, motivations, and emotional context so that their interactions support rather than subvert human agency. Achieving this vision requires a radical rethinking of AI development. We must embed ethical reasoning into learning models from the very beginning, not bolt it on as an afterthought. We must create AI systems with built-in tendencies toward cooperation, empathy, and interpretability. Systems designed to be psychologically legible to the humans they serve. This is the essence of agency-preserving design. Technologies that enhance, rather than replace, our ability to think, choose, and act for ourselves. Such a shift demands we move away from viewing AI as a tool, and instead recognize it as a form of intelligence we must learn to live alongside. Our goal should not be to dictate every decision made by superintelligent systems, an effort that risks failure or leads to authoritarian oversight. Instead, we must build AI that is fundamentally compatible with human flourishing, systems that preserve the integrity of choice, the dignity of judgment, and the freedom to shape our own future in a world increasingly shared with artificial minds. AGI is not the end of agency. It is the beginning of a new kind of relationship, one in which intelligence serves not just its own advancement, but the enduring values of human life. Embrace systems thinking. Second, we must move beyond the outdated, reductionist mindset that treats the natural, built, and digital worlds as distinct and disconnected spheres. In reality, these realms are increasingly interwoven, forming one complex, dynamic system in which changes in one domain reverberate through the others. A sustainable future will not be built by addressing these worlds in isolation, but by understanding and designing for their interdependence. This requires a fundamental shift in how we think, plan, and act, a move toward truly transdisciplinary approaches that draw from a wide range of expertise. We need to integrate insights from ecology, psychology, urban planning, computer science, economics, ethics, public health, and beyond. Each discipline offers a critical piece of the puzzle, but only by bringing them together can we begin to grasp the full picture of sustainability and resilience. This shift also demands that we abandon the tendency to optimize for narrow metrics such as carbon output, economic efficiency, screen time, while ignoring broader systemic impacts. For example, a digital tool may improve energy efficiency but increase social isolation. A new urban development may reduce emissions but exacerbate mental health stressors. A policy might protect biodiversity while undermining economic equity. Designing for sustainability means recognizing these trade-offs and seeking holistic solutions that balance multiple outcomes across interconnected systems. We need technologies and policies that are systems-aware by design, ones that anticipate feedback loops, unintended consequences, and the subtle interplay between psychological experience, ecological health, and digital infrastructure. It's not enough to make progress in one domain while causing harm in another. True integration means creating synergies, where digital tools support ecological stewardship, where urban design promotes mental well-being, and where economic systems reward behaviors that strengthen the planet's life support systems. Only by designing across these boundaries, intellectually, institutionally, and technologically, can we address the complexity of the challenges we face. This is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Because in an era where environmental degradation, mental health crises, and algorithmic influence are colliding at scale, piecemeal thinking is no longer enough. We need to move from fragmentation to coherence, from silos to systems, and design a future that is not only more sustainable, but more human. The choice before us. We stand at a defining moment in human history, one that will shape not only the trajectory of our civilization, but the fate of much of life on Earth. Our repeated failure to integrate sustainably across the natural, built, and digital worlds has unleashed a cascade of converging crises: ecological collapse, widespread psychological distress, and the destabilizing effects of unchecked digital influence. Yet within these failures lies a deeper truth, a set of hard-earned lessons about what true sustainable integration requires. The choice before us is stark and urgent. We can continue down the well-worn path of constructing ever more complex systems that maximize short-term profit while eroding the very foundations of long-term well-being. Or we can confront these failures with clarity and courage and begin the transformative work of building systems rooted in sustainability, equity, and interdependence. Systems that align with rather than exploit human psychology. Systems that value long-term resilience over quarterly gains. systems that recognize that human flourishing and planetary health are not separate goals but one and the same. The stakes are no longer theoretical. We are witnessing the unraveling of ecological systems that sustain life. Our cities, designed without regard for emotional and social needs, are producing epidemics of isolation, anxiety, and disconnection. Our digital environments, driven by engagement metrics rather than human values, are reshaping our consciousness, relationships, and identities in ways we barely understand. And yet, within this cascading crisis lies a singular opportunity, the chance to learn from our past, to evolve beyond the fragmented thinking that brought us here, and to build a civilization that honors the integrity of all three worlds we now inhabit. We are not lacking in knowledge, we are not lacking in tools or technology. What we are lacking is the collective wisdom, the moral clarity, and the political will to apply what we already know. That is the challenge of our time, and it will define whether we remain architects of collapse or stewards of renewal. The question is no longer whether we can build a sustainable future, it is whether we will. And the answer to that question will echo far beyond our own generation. It will shape the destiny of all life on this planet for centuries to come.